Hey artists, welcome back to part 2 of color theory. We already completed this page and we will be moving on to the second where we talk about shades and tints. You can get this resource completely free on my website at thecraftedcaravanaz.com. Let's jump into the first vocabulary word, which is hue. And I have here that that's another name for color. It's basically the root of a color. So blue, red, yellow, and green are all hues. Saturation refers to the purity, intensity, or vividness of a color. So when it comes straight out of the tube, it's at its most saturated. Value is how light or dark a hue is. So when we add black, we get a shade, and when we add white, we get a tint. Let's move on to making our shades and tints. You can use any color for this. I'm going to choose red, and I'm going to put some of that down on my palette along with some black and white. Okay, I'm going to start spreading my red out, and on my sheet, I'm going to fill out the far left circle with red. Now you might have chosen blue or yellow, or if you're doing this right after our color theory lesson, the first page, you might have green, orange, or purple. And you can use any of those colors. You're just going to fill in that first circle. Now, when we make a shade, we're going to be mixing it with black. So black needs to go in the next circle. Make sure you're cleaning your brush thoroughly between paints, or grab a new brush if you need to. There we have it. Now when we add red and black together, we get a darker red, and that's called a shade. One thing I'm trying to be careful not to do is to combine all my red with all my black, because then I can't grab the colors as I need them, and I might need them later. So I'm trying to create different swatches on my palette that I can always come back to. And once I'm happy with my shade, I will put it down in that third circle. As I move on to tinting my color, I need to make sure I wash my paintbrush out really well, especially when we're transitioning from black to a lighter paint. So make sure that's really nice and clean. And now I'll do the same thing. I'm going to make a new swatch on my palette instead of just mixing all my white and all my red together. And as you can see, when we combine red and white, we get a nice pink color. Now let's go ahead and fill in from left to right, our red first. Then we'll grab some white. And finally, pink. When I'm mixing colors with a brush rather than a palette knife, I find that the paint tends to chunk up toward the top of the bristles rather than the bottom. So I try to keep flipping my brush as I'm mixing so that I can mix everything thoroughly and those chunks tend to work their way down. Let's move down to the bottom portion of the worksheet that says skin tones. Now, the purpose of this part of the worksheet is for us to learn how to make brown, which is a combination of the primary colors blue, red, and yellow. Now, to be clear, You can use this knowledge to paint a tree, a bear, a mountain, anything brown, and it will still be the same concept. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my paints and bring them over to the side rather than just mixing one big brown blob, so that I can grab these colors later and adjust if I need to. Now I'm adding just a tiny bit of blue because it is so dark, but my brown is looking a little too orange, so I grab more blue, and it's starting to look a little better. Now, if your brown is starting to lean too far in one direction, so let's say, for example, it's starting to look too orange, I need to look at my color wheel and use the opposite color to level it out. So if it's looking too orange, I'll look across the color wheel and I'll add blue. If it's looking too red, I need to add green. And if I don't have green, I know that blue and yellow make green. So I'll add a little bit of those into it. And that's part of why it's so important to make sure you're keeping your colors separated on your palette so you can always grab more of them later. So let's make sure we're filling out our circles with red, yellow, and blue. Now we're going to have a blank spot to the right. And because this section says skin tones, the last circle, if you haven't already guessed it, will be white. Now I did not include a circle on here for black for when we want to darken brown, and that's because I advise people to use blue instead. I think that when you use black, it can create a really muddy brown, and blue can darken while still holding on to the saturation, and it creates more depth and more interest in your painting. Now let's add some white to the palette and grab a little bit of that and start mixing a lighter brown. And you can see I'm doing it just on the side so I can preserve that darker brown if I need it. It's easy for me to manipulate the color of my brown because I've not mixed all of my colors together in a big blob. So make sure you're keeping those colors separate, or as much as you can. Now let's fill in our white circle. And finally, let's fill in our last circle, our brown, or our skin tone. Before we say goodbye, I want to show you how to darken your brown. So right on top of what I just created, I'm going to grab all of my colors again, my red, yellow, and blue, but this time I'll add in more blue, and you can see how quickly it darkens and how nice it looks without having to use black. So as you can see here, I'm still able to achieve a really rich brown without using black, and it's a lot darker than what I started with. The more blue I add, the darker it will get. And that's it for part 2 of color theory. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful day and that you keep creating. See you next time.